Hi, this is Terry Manning, and you're listening to Jim and Mike Talk Music.
Come on, baby. Time to learn a lesson. There ain't no need in me going on. What's the use, baby? What's the use? I turn my back and you do me wrong. What's the use, honey? What's the use? I know for certain I caught you flirting. You got me hurting over you. Baby, what's the use? Whoa! Once it was good, but it ain't no more.
We've got a special guest with us today. He's a rockabilly musician, music producer, and engineer who's worked with Led Zeppelin, ZZ Top, Joe Cocker, Lenny Kravitz, to name a few. He's also a professional photographer. Let's all welcome to Jim and Mike Talk Music, Mr. Terry Manning.
And the crowd goes wild. It's a large studio, yeah.
Applause. Thank you. Hello, audience. Yes.
Yes. So how are you doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Great, and you're in Texas. Is that
I'm
true?
in far west Texas, in the desert. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. Great. We see behind you a studio looking great, not just the typical living room. A lot of people,
No.
right from your living
No,
room.
I've got an actual mixing and overdubbing and mastering rooms here.
Oh, wow.
Do we call you Terry? Do you got other nicknames people call you, like, the man, Manning?
Terry, I've been called many things, but most of them we don't repeat. So Terry, that's fine. Thanks.
Mike and I went on your website, and you've got a very extensive resume.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't possibly talk about everything. So we've, picked and...
Good. No.
Because that'd be 3 hours. For our listeners, a lot of people don't, maybe your name isn't a household name to some people, but I was thinking about it. They have heard your unique sounds. They have heard what you've put into the music. Everybody has heard what you've put into the music because they've, unless they don't listen to music, unless they're deaf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they don't know you, they know what you've produced and engineered and such.
Just the way I like it. No, a lot of people behind the scenes always aren't known, and that's just fine, I think, with Mo, because everybody doesn't want to be a big famous star in front of NBC cameras and things. But it is really an honor to have made music that people know and love over the years. So that's a great thing. That's a great part of it.
Yeah, it is.
Now, in 2013, you were inducted into the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. Can you tell us a little bit about the Rockabilly Hall of Fame? That's in Texas, correct?
Well, actually, two of them. One's in Jackson, Tennessee. It's the International Rockabilly Hall of Fame, and the other, I think, is in Texas. But I was inducted into the International Rockabilly Hall of Fame. They had called and asked me if I would come play a show there for their every year they have a show and an induction of different people. So I got my band together and we worked some stuff up, some cool old rockabilly things, something else by Eddie Cochran, stuff like that, and went to play the show. And at the end of it, they said, "Oh, and here's a surprise." And they walked out with this big certificate and everything. It really was a very shocking to me. It was a surprise to be actually inducted, and people with like Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis and things that I've always grew up loving, stuff like that.
Wow, that must have been a great day. What year was that, or when was that?
I think it was 2013-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
13 or 14.
What were some of the artists that inspired you to pick up a guitar? I mean, I'm assuming, I'm going to guess, like, there's probably many, but probably the Beatles, Eddie Cochran, you mentioned, Buddy Holly, Elvis. What were you listening to?
Way back.
Yeah. And
yeah. Well, as a even before teenager, growing up, my dad did a radio show that is a minister, and he did every week a religious radio show, and I would go with him to the station sometimes and just sit there and look at all the equipment and this is really exciting. Watching microphones and things, transmitters and stuff. It was really fun to see. So I got a radio for Christmas don't know, 9 or 10 or 11 years old, something like that, and started turning it on to the AM radio stations and hearing Buddy Holly, Elvis, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, so many early things. I guess that dates me, unfortunately. But
yeah, we remember starting out with 1230 AM radio, WEX. Yeah, AM.
Yeah, AM radio. There wasn't really, they didn't play rock and roll on FM radio yet. That wasn't until probably mid 70s or early 70s, maybe.
Yeah, that's when we started listening.
Yeah, so I would just bop along with Wear My Ring Around Your Neck by Elvis, or Teddy Bear, or Hound Dog, all those things. And Buddy Holly really got to me. I just loved Buddy Holly.
Love Buddy.
Elvis was great, but to me, Buddy Holly and Eddie Cochran were the ones that really were just deeply rocking somehow to me. And
well,
of course,
Elvis was more managed. People were managing.
it was managed, more produced, more planned, I guess. And Elvis wasn't writing the songs. I love Elvis. He was great, but Buddy Holly wrote his own songs. And it sort of seemed to come from the heart to me.
Right.
And I just really got into that. Plus, growing up in Texas, and he was a Texas boy from Lubbock. And West Texas, my place. So just Buddy Holly was king. Absolutely.
Wasn't it amazing though, the amount of songs that Buddy Holly wrote? I think he wrote like 200
in a short time.
And what he could have done,
Oh my God. He was really only around, I like to say, about 18 months. I mean, you could depend on when you say he started, but it was obvious when he stopped. But not much more than a year and a half. He wrote all those songs, had those hit records, and he was gone at what, 22, 23 years old? Jeez, that was just absolutely amazing.
So you were able then, as a 10 to 12-year-old, seeing inside a studio, your dad doing a Christian broadcast, but seeing the equipment, knowing what it can do, starting out with an engineer ear to start with, the quality, that sounds bad, that sounds good, this is what you do. I mean, even with talk radio, was your dad spinning tunes too, or was it talk radio?
No, it was all talk radio, doing his sermon of the week or something like that. But there would be an engineer at the studio there, the radio studio, and they would, be testing mics and make sure the levels were right and make sure they got a good quality signal to the transmitter and everything. So that was just an introduction, as you're saying, to the technical side of it. And I was getting the musical side of it from the radio. So I had no choice. I was hooked.
Another musician that died fairly young was Bobby Fuller. And now you got to play with Bobby Fuller. Like, how well did you know Bobby?
I knew him really well. I call him my first real mentor, not counting my dad at the radio station, but my first music mentor. To a junior high school dance we had. The teacher in homeroom one day, in I guess the 8th grade, 7th grade, the 8th grade, something like that, said to the class, we're going to have a dance. We're going to learn social graces. Every boy in the class will ask a girl in the class to come to this dance. The parents will chaperone, the teachers will chaperone. And I thought, oh God, a dance. I don't want to do that. But they said, we're going to have a band play. I had never seen a band live. And I thought, oh, a band. Okay, let's go see what that's like. So I asked the girl right in front of me in class, this girl in the class, fortunately.
The nearest girl, that's great.
Exactly.
Tap her on the shoulder.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. She'd already was mad at me because she was really cute, and I would kind of mess with her, tap her here and there on the back. I mean, and pull her hair or something like that at 13, 14 years old. And she had already stabbed me in the knee with a pencil once. So.
Wow.
But she said, I'll go to the dance. So we get to the dance, and the band is Bobby Fuller's band. Now, this wasn't just a band. They were really, really good. I mean, they were not just a local band. They were top class. Within 2 or 3 years, they were touring all over the country with hit records. But at this time, they were still a local band playing a junior high sock hop or whatever it was.
Wow.
So I didn't really, I tried to dance for a minute or two. My mother had tried to teach me all week, and very embarrassingly. But I said, you know what, Date, you sit in the corner. I'm going to go up and talk to the band.
Yeah.
So I went up at the end of one of the sets and went right to Bobby and said, Mr. Fuller, sir, would you mind if I sat in with your band?
Wow.
And he just laughed. And instead of being just, oh, kid, leave me alone, please, he said, I tell you what, have you learned some songs? And, yeah, I've learned Peggy Sue and Oh Donna. He said, come on up. And he handed me his guitar. And he got the other guitarist's guitar. They rest of the band couldn't have cared less. They just went and took a break. But me and Bobby sat up there and played Peggy Sue and O'Donna to my junior high class.
Wow.
And at that point, it was all over. Okay, This is it. I'm a star.
This is what you want to
do. Now, so
we don't know if that impressed the Date, but that didn't really matter. She wasn't into music, but that's amazing.
Well, I don't really always say this, but the Date, her name was Stephanie, Stephanie Nicks, and she sat right in front of me. She later changed her name, dropped to use her nickname of Stevie Nicks, and she joined the band. So that was, believe it or not, me and Stevie Nicks sitting there trying to dance to Bobby Fuller.
It was the Stevie Nicks? Or?
It was the Stevie Nicks, yes.
Really? Oh my God.
She lived in El Paso. Her dad was in the Army, and they would go all around. So
wow.
Anyway, that's just a bizarre junior high school dance.
Wow. Now, were you in a band at the time, or was that your first public performance?
No, I didn't even have an electric guitar yet. I only had a Montgomery Ward's acoustic that my parents had given me for Christmas, and I learned a few chords, especially Peggy Sue in D, and that was just great.
So you're practicing them on your acoustic at home. You're singing and practicing.
Was it A? It may have been an A. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, I spoke over you. I didn't hear that.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. That's an amazing story. Insane.
More amazing if Stevie got up there and sang too,
Oh my God! Wouldn't that have been?
Bobby Fuller off is what you're saying. Just him and Stevie.
Yeah.
But
no, that's great.
Maybe I inspired her to sing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, very, very.
But yeah, within a year or so, I had moved on to high school. Austin High School, go Panthers, and several other guys that were in the neighborhood and were in the high school were also interested. And we did put a band together, called it Terry Manning and the Wild Ones. And we even recorded an album in the bathroom of the back house of our drummer.
It's funny you say that.
Single mono.
It's funny you
mono
say
reel to reel.
That mono reel to reel. Jim and I were just talking about it.
Yeah, when I listened to that, it says it came out in 2012, but I'm pretty sure that's probably when it was put on Apple Music.
Yeah, that's when it was released. It was recorded in, I hate to say it, 1963.
Ooh, I guess 62. I was guessing 62. I swear I was.
You're wrong.
So in my notes, I was going to ask you if that was recorded in your bathroom or your kitchen. I'm serious.
No, it was. It was in the bathroom. Our drummer, who didn't even have a drum kit yet, we had to borrow it sometimes. He played, tapped on boxes and tambourines and things. Oh, okay. And I sat on the toilet with the lid down, and the mic was out, so we had echo. It was just really
Someone
great.
Was in the tub.
Yeah.
Was the drummer in the tub?
It wasn't even a tub. It was just a shower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. As a drummer, I've played cardboard box. I've also played my right heel down on a stage, and the stage was a little weak, and so it was booming. So it works.
There you go.
Great story.
It's all you need. It's all about the rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not exactly the tone. It is the rhythm.
Now, how long did you know Bobby Fuller? You knew him up until he died?
So let's see. It would have been about, he left El Paso at about the same time I did, and he went to Los Angeles. I saw him for the last time at the Skylane Bowling Alley on Dyer Street in El Paso. So I was there with the church youth group to go bowling, and I saw him sitting over at where they sold hamburgers and hot dogs. And there's Bobby. And I went again, "Hi, Mr. Fuller," because I had been phoning him and talking to him, and how do you write a song? What is it? And I'd go to his house. He had a home studio in the 60s. What could it have been? Well, he had bought Ampex recorders. He bought Telefunken microphones. I mean, he built an echo chamber. He was really going for it. So I would go over there and watch and say, well, why did you push that button? Now, what is producing? What do you mean when just asking all these dumb, naive kid questions? And he was always just lovely and kind and explaining things. I just can't ever say enough good things about him as a human being to give of what he had already learned. And he was young. I was like 13 or 14, but he was maybe 19 or 20. So he was young too. Wow. But about the time he left to go to California with his band to try to get a record deal, my dad moved us to Memphis, Tennessee. So I guess for a couple of years, I knew him pretty well, something like that. But after that, we corresponded by mail up until the time he died. Unfortunately, was murdered.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. So he gave you time even as a 14-year-old, and him being 19, 20, whatever. He's given you time. And because he knows your enthusiasm, right, and your interest and your ability to play guitar with him and such.
I guess. I mean, he must have seen something, or just I may have just pestered him to death and he couldn't avoid me. I don't know.
Yeah. A great story of
he had his own. Exactly. He had his own record label. He had his own nightclub called the Rendezvous. It was a teen club with no alcohol. He and other bands would play. It was just amazing. I was in awe of this. I thought adult, but he was really a kid, just an older kid. But I was just in awe of someone who had made so much of himself already. He was unstoppable. And when he got to California, he signed a record deal, recorded Fought the Law and several other songs, had top 10 hits all over the world. I mean, wow. What a guy. He had the power.
I remember a little side note. I remember, in the 80s, there was clubs like that, the underage clubs, the non-alcoholic clubs, really bringing some live music to those who want to dance or just sit on the sidelines and listen, those who want to play. And, we don't have as much we don't have that anymore. I don't really think that's happening. A great place for the 14 to 20-year-olds to go, because we experienced that.
We wouldn't know if they had them. Because we're not going.
No, but we've got kids. We've got kids. We're not going. But it's that in itself was something special. Be it Christian influenced or not. Or just under 21. That's a thing in itself that's special.
Yeah.
There must be some of that today, I guess. But there's also as many bands or live gigs at all with the DJ thing and rap and all changing things. Yeah. But I'm just about to produce a new band, and they're playing good gigs up in Wisconsin. So
great.
When you started at Stax Records, you basically walked in there. Tell us the story and asked for a job.
I did. I had by this time gotten a Telecaster guitar, playing electric, and I took it one day to school because from El Paso about Stax Records because I had bought Rufus Thomas records or the Marquis last night, some very early Stax records. And I had seen them and I knew there was a record company in Memphis, so I couldn't wait to go to that place. So I took my guitar one day, put it in my locker, locked it up real good so it wouldn't get stolen. And after school, took the bus as far as I could get, close as I could get to Stax Records, and walked the rest of the way, 926 Macklemore, Memphis, Tennessee. And I went in, knocked on the door, rang the bell, whatever it was. And the regular secretary was either at lunch or off that day. And a woman named Deanie Parker was on the front desk. She was actually an artist, Stax artist, and ran one of the publicity department. So she was on the front desk, and she kind of laughed a little, said, "Come on in, son. Let's hear what's your spiel." So I said, "Well, I'm going to write, I'm going to record, I'm going to sing, I'm going to play, I'm going to produce, I'm going to engineer. What have you got? Just give me a job." And she talked to me nicely a few minutes, and then said, "Well, you probably ought to come back in a few years," because I was 15 years old.
Wow.
She said, "You should probably come back in a few years and go learn what some of the things that you want to do, and then when you come back, maybe we'll have a place for you." So I was not unexpected would be a response, but still I was a little sad. So I just was picking up my guitar and about to turn and leave when a guy walked in, tall guy, handsome guy, and he said, "Hey there, son, there's a guitar case. What's in your case?" And I said, "It's a Telecaster, sir." He said, "Well, come on to me." So I sat down on some chairs with this guy, and he said, "I play a Telecaster." He said, "My name's Steve Cropper." I said, "Oh, good, Mr. Cropper." And I didn't know who he was yet, but of course, he was a guitarist for Booker T and the MGs, a songwriter, a producer of many of the Stax records. And he sat there, asked me what I wanted. We talked. I played the guitar a little bit. He said, "Yeah, nice Telecaster. It's a 1952, by the way. I still have it."
Wow.
And he said, "Well, can you run a tape recorder?" And I said, Yeah, I've run tape recorders. So he took me back to their tape copy room in the hall, where they went, because there were not even cassettes yet. There was certainly nothing to do. You had to take a tape or cut an acetate to send somebody a copy. So he said, "We copy things here. We do master copies to send overseas, or copies to take home for the artist, or various things." So after school, I actually a day or two a week, whenever, would go over to Stax after school and copy tapes. So I would, whenever I could, I would sneak down the hall, peek in the real studios, and watch what was going on. Look at the engineers, see what they were, where they would plug the mics, what buttons they were pushing. Trying to glean how it all worked from looking, but being very quiet. I knew don't disturb things.
Yeah.
But by doing that, walking around, I was kind of got to be known by the Stax people. They would see me, and see me in the tape room or whatever. And one day, an engineer had not showed up for some demo session that was going on. And someone came in the hall and saw me in the tape room and said, "You engineer, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, come down here and record this thing." So I went in and pushed a few buttons, and all of a sudden the sound came out, and they said, "Oh, great, hit record." And I was an engineer. So it just morphed from there on into more and more. I also started my band. I'm talking too much. Sorry.
No, we want you.
My local.
Definitely not talking too much. Go ahead.
I joined a local Memphis band. My good friend for life, Joe Gaston, who was a bass player, also went to Central High School, Go Warriors, in Memphis. And one day he said, I hear you, play music and stuff. Our keyboard player is leaving our band. Would you want to join the band and come try out for it? So I said, sure. I went home to my dad. "You got to get me a keyboard quick." So we went down to a music store on Highland Avenue, Burl Swanger Music in Memphis. And he bought me, I looked at several things, and he bought me a Wurlitzer electric piano, which little did I know at the time was an all-time classic, iconic instrument. But that's what I had. Couldn't afford the organ, but they had a very old used Wurlitzer piano. And I got that, tried out with the band. It was called Bobby and the Originals. And they said, "Yep, okay, you could be in the band." So there I was in a band. They had just previously gone to a studio called Sonic that was run by Roland James, who was the former guitarist for Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh.
He had his own little studio, little mono or stereo, whatever, demo studio. And the band had just cut a demo without me, I wasn't in yet, to try to get on a TV show called Talent Party, which was run by a DJ at WHBQ radio and TV named George Klein. He was Elvis's best friend and the top DJ at the time in Memphis. So everybody wanted on his TV show. So they had this little demo tape, but the band didn't think it was quite good enough sounding technically. So our manager at the time, it was the gentleman who had sold me the Wurlitzer piano at the music store. He took it to a friend of his named John Fry, who had a home studio in Memphis. So we all trekked over there to John Fry's home studio in Memphis. John had a great home studio with Ampex recorders and Neumann microphone and great equipment for the time. You wouldn't have believed it, And so we started hanging out there, and he called this studio Ardent. Ardent Studios, and it turned out into a many year friendship, association, career. So I was working at, well, he decided a couple of years later to put in a real studio for rent, and rented a building, put in a big studio with a Spectra board and Scully tape recorders. And so I got a job at Ardent Studio as the first employee with John Fry. And I was working at Stax and at Ardent. And boy, I was just totally immersed in Memphis music.
That's amazing.
Was that by the time you were a little older? Because at Stax,
I would be 17, 18 maybe.
17, 18.
Yeah. Wow.
I was grown up by then.
To get that experience that early on.
By 18 years old, I had recorded or worked on overdubs, whatever, records that were Billboard chart.
Yeah.
At 18 years old.
You were just at the right place at the right time. You walked that day, you knocked on that door. Wow.
Yep. Well, if Steve Cropper hadn't walked through and said, "Hi, who are you?"
Right.
If our manager hadn't taken the tape over to John High to get it EQ'd and compressed, basically mastered the tape for the TV show, which we did get on the TV show and terrorized it. But it was just an amazing thing. So within 2 or 3 years, there were big artists coming to the studio, Stax artists, artists all over Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, whatever, up to Ardent Studios. And I was working almost 24 hours a day.
Wow.
All sorts of things.
Wow. As an 18-year-old. Now you talked about
17, 18-year-old.
You talked about the Wurlitzer piano. So we jumped from guitar right to keys. So, somewhere in there you had learned, you've learned to play piano.
Well, my mother was a piano teacher.
Well, there you go.
She taught everybody but me, and I refused. Yeah. I'm not having lessons from my mom. So she actually sent me to another piano teacher who could whap me on the hand or tell me what to do.
Yeah,
but
you just didn't want to learn
I had
from
learned.
Mom. Yeah, I know how it goes.
No, it's crazy because I should have done that because she was very good. She played piano in church, of course, piano and organ, and really read music fluently and knew everything about it. I should have taken more advantage of that, but with your mom, you don't think of it like that,
Yeah. My dad played piano, organ. We had a pump organ. He tuned piano for years, and I never learned. It just I thought I was cool. I was beyond that.
Exactly. That's how you do.
Yeah.
Boy, and a pump organ. Oh, they're awesome instruments.
Yeah, we had 2 different ones. Hey, speaking of keys, good segue into the Moog synthesizer. Now, this innovation, it brought new sounds. It's a whole different instrument. Can you tell us about the Moog and maybe meeting Robert Moog, possibly in New York, learning from him?
Absolutely, but very first thing is it is pronounced Moog.
It is.
Oh, okay.
It is wrong, Jim.
No, it is Moog, and I asked Bob Moog himself, Robert Moog, when I met him and went up to his place, how do you say it? And he said, it's Moog. And if you'll notice...
Learn one thing today, it's how to pronounce it properly, Moog.
A few years later, he came out with an instrument called the Rogue, the Moog Rogue. Oh. And he did that so that people would hopefully learn how it was pronounced. Of course, there's a brake company called Moog that makes brakes for cars, I think, and the other things that are pronounced Moog.
Oh, right. I just bought some wheel bearings for my Mini, and it's Moog, M-O-O-G.
Yeah. Right, pronounced differently. So.
It's different. So thanks for clarifying that. Tell us about learning that, and what year is this? I love history, so I love to know about what year you're talking.
I know, and I for years I wouldn't say the year name.
You don't have to. Hey Terry.
But no, now it's so what it's all water under a bridge. It was 1968, and I had heard about these new synthesizers coming out, and a guy named Moog, whatever I didn't know how to say it yet. In upstate New York, there that was making these things, and a couple of guys came over from a jingle company who had been there, and to get some things recorded because he had a studio too in his factory. So they said, "Oh yeah, we can tell you how to get there." So I flew on Mohawk Airlines, which they also called it Slowhawk. I found out, but. to Ithaca, New York. I flew out of Newark first, and then flew on Mohawk to Ithaca, New York, and then got a taxi to Trumansburg, New York, which is where Bob Moog had his factory. And I had called in advance and set up a week or whatever, however long I was there, close to a week appointment with him, and went in. And he knew. I told him I want to learn everything, anything musical or photography. I just want to learn it, or airplanes. So anyway, I went in, met him and his assistant Daniel, and they had a studio. And I just started every day taking lessons in how to program, learning from the basis. The very basic of it, which is starting with an oscillator that makes the tone, and then the filters, the various things that change the tone, and then the keys that make it stop and start when you want it to do, and the ADSR that tells it how long to play, and you hit the note and when to cut off. Just all the things about it. Everything was very individualized at that time. It's what today they call them the modular Moogs, but every single thing was its own little box component in this big wooden rack, and you actually had to patch everything together from the oscillator to the filter. There was no presets at all, nothing like a preset yet. Every sound started with one or more oscillators being mixed through the mixer, and you had to do it manually. Everything. Yeah,
you're working everything as you're playing it. As you're doing this song, you got to remember how to patch this stuff together and how to do it every time, right?
Oh yeah, and every time you finished a sound and wanted a new sound, you had to take it all, unpatch everything, and start from scratch. And it sounds like a lot of work, and it was, but what it was an amazing lesson in sound synthesis and production, where sounds come from. So even though now I'll just open the computer back there or wherever and pull up a virtual instrument, and you can just take the patch and you start playing it. Still, I remember every time where those sounds came from, how they got there. And I think it's just like learning engineering on a totally manual board, which I did, console. That's the way I learned. There was no automation of any kind, but just learning how it all works and why it works and what you have to do to get to a final goal was just a great lesson. I wish more people today could learn that way, because you learn so much about just the ground, from the ground up, of sound and where it comes from.
Right. So you had to go deeper into. I have an electronics degree, so going deeper into the frequencies, right? Knowing and what the lower frequencies do and how they can travel and all this such. And of course, Bob Moog and his assistant, I forgot his last name now, but it's Daniel. Anyway, they both knew, because people like Bernie Krause and and Walter Carlos, who became Wendy Carlos, all had been there or were learning from Bob Moog around the same time, or a little earlier. So they were very well versed in teaching it from the ground up, and it was just an amazing. I can't believe it now, looking back. I can't believe I got to do that. And you spent how long with Bob Moog?
It was almost a week, probably about 5 days. That I stayed in Trumansburg, stayed at some little hotel there, the only hotel in town, and went every day and just learned. An interesting story is that one day I was, Bob said at one point, I'm going to go down to the sandwich shop and get some sandwiches. What do you want? So I gave him what I wanted, and he said, I'll run down there, but I'd like for you to stay here if you would, because REA Express, now that's the company that was the big delivery company before Federal Express and UPS and things like that. It was a Railway Express agency. REA said, REA is going to be delivering a box, and I want to be sure that you're here to receive it. So I said, sure, yeah, I'll just wait. Sure enough, here comes the REA guy with the box, and he puts it down there and said, would you sign here? And I looked down at the box, and the return address was G. Harrison, at Abbey Road, 3 Abbey Road, whatever, London, England. I said, wait a minute.
Wow.
And as soon as Bob came in, I was just jumping around. This is G. Harrison, is that? He says, yes. It's George Harrison's keyboard. He thinks it's defective, which it's not, because there's a tuning problem. George has bought with the Beatles, bought a big modular Moog, a Moog that like the one I subsequently bought. Said, and he thinks the tuning problem is with the keyboard, and it's not. It's the modules; they're just not stable enough yet. But I'll give him a new keyboard. And I said, well, when I buy mine, which is why I was there, so I want this keyboard.
Wow.
So he said, sure, take it. It's fine. So I put up my initials on the bottom of it so I could tell. I did buy a Model 3C Moog synthesizer. And when it came, I couldn't wait to open that box. And sure enough, there was my little mark on the bottom of the keyboard. I'd gotten the Beatles keyboard.
That's a great story.
Do you still have it?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh.
It wasn't. I keep saying mine, but it was actually Ardent Studios synthesizer, but I was the guy who was there to program it and open up with it and to help people, who wanted to rent it. But John Fry later decided that when a new company called ARP came out, ARP came out with their synthesizers, he had a chance to be the ARP dealer for the Mid-South. And so he said, well, I'm going to sell the Moog and we'll get an ARP. And I was just heartbroken and still am. So instead we got this stupid ARP that was never nearly as good, never sounded the same. Anyway, no, it's gone. I do know where it is, though, that original one. A friend of mine actually has it, and it's in storage in Memphis somewhere, but I'll probably never be able to have it.
Yeah. Hey, the story.
Plus, itself, I have the plug-in. I have the plug-in now. Who needs it?
The story itself is valuable. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I got a closet full of clothes. No matter where I go, I keep a ring in my nose. But I ain't got you. I got a tailor and a liquor store. I play the numbers. Yeah, 444.
We'll get into some of the albums you produced and engineered, but I'm interested in, I love Led Zeppelin, as you can see I'm wearing.
Yeah.
I'm about to get a tattoo, the symbols for each.
Excellent.
Symbols with an S, not symbols with a C.
Yeah.
Please.
Symbols. Yeah.
To a symbol with a C.
Tell us about the first time you met Jimmy Page or how that came about.
Well, the band that I was playing in, I mentioned earlier that previously was called Bobby and the Originals. It turns out there was another Originals out somewhere, so we couldn't use that name to have a record.
Not very original, really.
No, it wasn't original. But recorded a single at the early John Fry studio, the home studio, Ardent Studio, and they were about to release it on Ardent Records. And so they changed our name. We had to come up with a name. It's the hardest thing in music is to get a band name. But we went through all sorts of names. Nobody liked anything. And one day my dad suggested, because Bobby Lawson was the lead singer, had been Bobby in the Originals. He said, why don't you just call it Lawson Moore? And I just, that's horrible. But I mentioned it and it ended up being the name. And so our name was Lawson and Four More. We had a record coming out and they got us a job on to open on a tour that was coming to Memphis. It was called the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars, and it was playing. The show we played was at Skateland Fraser, where everybody skated. But it was it was a big auditorium size thing so they could set up a stage and have bands.
Yeah.
So we were one of the opening acts, but one of the acts on the show was Gary Lewis and the Boys, and I wasn't that interested. But another act was the Yardbirds, and I was really interested because I loved the Yardbirds. They were my favorite band at the time. I just couldn't wait, since I could now be officially backstage, to go meet the Yardbirds. So I did. I went back and met them, and Jimmy was not actually in the band yet at that point. Jeff Beck was still guitar. And so but I met everybody. We talked backstage, and they said, hey, we're coming back on another tour in a couple of months, so come out to some of the shows. So I couldn't wait, and I went to 2 shows. One of the shows, the final of those 2, was in Murray, Kentucky. It was at Murray State University in their gymnasium. So I couldn't wait, and I got to the show. I went backstage, and there was the new guitar. Well, he actually was playing bass at the time, Jimmy Page. But Jeff Beck had just left the band a couple of days earlier, left his Esquire with Jimmy and said, you play lead. So Jimmy was quickly going over all the songs backstage on lead guitar, and the rest of the Yardbirds were going, I wonder if Jimmy Page can pull off lead guitar. We'll see.
Well, I don't know.
Well, he wasn't the...
they knew.
Yeah, no.
He wasn't the Jimmy Page
could.
we know now.
Yeah.
No, but he was the top session guitarist in London. He played on all kinds of hit records, as did John Paul Jones, as session musicians. But Jimmy wanted to be in a band, wanted to really take the yards much farther. So, of course, the band wasn't really worried he wouldn't do it, but it was kind of a fun thing. They're going, hey, can you play lead guitar there, Page? So I went right up. And
at Skateland, by the way, Can you play Skateland?
So it's a very important gig. Every gig's important. But anyway, so I went up to Jimmy and introduced myself and said, hey, and I'm working at Stax Records and from Memphis, Tennessee, and Ardent Studios, blah, 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 just talking everything. And he was captivated because he loved Memphis music. Sun Records, of course, Elvis, Jerry Lee, Roy Orbison, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, all of those great things out of Sun Records. And he loved Stax, the early Stax Records. He loved Booker T and the MGs. He was a big Steve Cropper fan. So,
and it's all right there, right nearby.
We're just a few miles. So we're in Kentucky, just down the road from Memphis, really, or up the road
from London.
So I watched the show, went backstage afterwards, and we had really just hit it off right away. And I said, hey, you want to ride back to Memphis? Because the bus was about to leave for Memphis, the band bus. And I said, you want to I'm going there too. You want to just ride with me in the car? We can talk more. I said, yeah, sure. So we rode through the night, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, however long it is from Memphis to there. And I immediately drove to Ardent Studio in the middle of the night, probably 3 or 4 in the morning, and said, here's my studio. Want to have a look? Sure. So he came in, it was just me and him, and I got all my guitars out, that same Telecaster, that 52 Telecaster, and some amps, and we just played a little and talked. And so he became inured to the fact that I was a professional in the business. I did work at big studios, good studios on real records. So it was just a sort of a joining of the minds thing that was happening there. And then a couple of years later, he was calling me up. He had not finished Led Zeppelin III yet. And he said, hey, your CEO, where I was, can you finish Led Zeppelin III for me? And I said, no, I don't want to. No, leave me alone. No, I didn't. I said, yeah, okay. So
of course you didn't say that.
But all along, he would mail me cassettes of the first Zeppelin album, the second album, and things as it's all in progress, and say, hey, what do you think? Here's what we're doing. And I would go, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's all right. But no, of course, I loved it. I was a fan immediately from day one. And so he came with Peter Grant and whoever was needed for an overdub, because they had a tour booked in the U.S. They were supposed to record and finish the third album, and it was to be released for the tour. The tour was to promote that album, but they hadn't finished it. So it was mostly recorded, but a few things left, and then not mixed and not mastered. So he said, I'll come between shows. We'll start playing the tour. And as soon as there's a day off, I'll fly in and we'll bring anybody that's needed. Peter Grant, the manager, will always come just to watch over him. And so several times between shows, probably, I'm guessing about 6 different days, but on off days of tour days, we'd fly into Memphis. I'd go out to the airport, pick them up, drive over to the studio. And I had got with John Fry and just blocked the studio out. Nobody came in the studio that whole time.
Right.
Over the part of, I think it was August of 70, maybe, but about close to 2 weeks or so, because they were playing shows and then would record. So it was days lost in the studio. But whatever that was, nobody else came. We just locked it out completely. Even John, the owner, didn't come.
Yeah. And
we would just work all through the night, whatever it took to do whatever, an overdub, and especially on the mixing then.
Yeah.
We'd mix maybe 2 songs a day, mixing, and then come back and mixing again a couple of days later, Yeah. And once we finished it all, edited the album, I sequenced the album, put it all together, and we took it over to a place called Mastercrafts that mastered to vinyl. And the mastering engineer there and I mastered it with Jimmy's input of, EQ and various things. And we just did the whole finishing right there.
I'm thinking about the sequencing. You do mean order of the songs?
Sorry, yeah, that's the order, because when you mix, you just mix one song at a time.
Oh, of course.
And you mix it to a tape. And then later you have to take all the various mixes and put together on a reel in order so that the mastering engineer can actually start playing the side. You did a side 1 and a side 2
on a reel to reel,
and on a reel to reel tape, a 1/4-inch tape, and the mastering engineer will then start that side 1 tape and master all the way through onto vinyl through to the end, and in between the songs push a button that makes the little groove that separates the song, so it's a wider groove, so you can see how many songs are on it and things.
Yeah. So thinking about the production of Led Zeppelin III there with you and Jimmy Page, what was there anything different? Was there any new sounds, or was there any new techniques, something different on that album? I mean, you're just going for as good as you can possibly ever get. Everything you do, you're going to do as good as it can get. Is there anything different or new that was, going back in your mind there?
Well, the most of the music I was working on at that time would have been B music, Stax music, or some rock music, rock bands, local bands, or a couple of bands came up sometimes from Florida or from different places to record.
Not that heavy, maybe.
At Arden, but nothing of that. I mean, to be honest, there was no band in the world as good as Led Zeppelin. And has there been yet? No, there has not. So all of a sudden, going from mostly other styles of music, I would do some country music, things like that, whatever, to the biggest band in the world, already the biggest band, and of course the Beatles and Zeppelin are both the biggest bands in the world in a different way. So
different way.
When I don't mean to ever demean the Beatles when I say that about Zeppelin, but there you are with the biggest band in the world, the heaviest music so far in the world, and the 4 best musicians in the world, counting Robert Plant as a musician, the 4 best musicians in the world at what they did, all in band at one time. So was it different? Yeah, it was different in that way. Just the power of it, the virtuosity of it was just incredible. Now, I was extremely, extremely lucky already to be working with some of the best musicians in the world. So I don't want to take away from, I was doing R&B music, something like that. We're talking Booker T, Al Jackson, Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper, Reggie Young, Willie Mitchell, and the whole crews at Stax, High Records, American Studios, some of the greatest musicians in the world there. But they're different style musicians than what Led Zeppelin were. They were playing a whole different style of music,
completely different category. And certainly you don't, talking about Led Zeppelin, you're not taking away from the Beatles or any of those others you just mentioned. I mean, it's just so completely different. It gives me chills just thinking about having completed, let's just say, one song, just with Zeppelin there, and it just gives me chills thinking about, like, wow, this is good. Like, how are you going to say that? Like, this is good.
Well, I remember very well to this day when even though I had heard it on cassette a little earlier, Jimmy had sent, but when the first album came, the first Zeppelin album, I was sitting with Richard Roseborough, who was a drummer, a very accomplished studio drummer, well known, played with Big Star and a lot of other people. But we were sitting together and we put the tone arm down on the groove, and when Good Times, Bad Times started, immediately the world changed. On an axis, it spun around. And Richard, who was a great drummer, just went, "What the is that? God!" And just, wow, listen to the bass drum. Listen to this guy.
Syncopated bass drum. It's not, there's nothing on beat there. Yeah.
Nobody had ever heard that before. Gene Krupa would do things like that. Jazz drummers, which is what Bonham wanted to be. Gene Krupa was his big idol of his life. But in rock music and local rock bands, whatever thing, just the power of the very, very first immediately changed everybody. Bands started playing differently. The radio was different. Everything was different from that second on.
It said, you can do this. You're allowed to do this.
We didn't know it was a thing. To have Jimmy sitting there with me mixing Led Zeppelin III and hearing and just the power going, and then the incredible depth of the acoustic numbers and the beauty that album changed Zeppelin. The third album changed maybe the first album and the second following up on that changed the world rock music, but the third album changed Led Zeppelin. All of a sudden, they could be seen as musicians who could play anything. They weren't just all power and screaming.
Oh yeah.
Robert Plant could sing beautiful, soft, slow things like Tangerine, and there was just incredible acoustic things. Oh my God! I mean, it's just incredible the depth that happened, and the real. I know I sound like I'm saying this for myself because I was involved with III, but I'm not. I'm saying it as a fan of it and of the band. That they wouldn't have had the incredible longevity to this day and the depth of so many styles and types of songs that they could do as a rock and roll band had it not been for that sudden break that happened on the third album. It really shocked a lot of reviewers. It shocked a lot of people. This isn't Led Zeppelin. What happened to that power? But they didn't want to just be, no offense to a Deep Purple or Black Sabbath or Ozzy Osbourne or anybody, but they didn't want to just be a heavy rock and roll band.
Well, that album is the least rocking album.
Yeah, it's sweet. Sweet sounds. And
compared to the first two.
Yeah.
That many.
Now they put some of that, they mixed those things in on all the later albums, but that's where it sort of was born, and it came from Jimmy and Robert going off to Wales and sitting in cottages in the country with no other influences but an acoustic guitar, and just saying, let's make music. We're making music.
Sweet. We're going to change gears here.
Forward a little bit.
Jumping ahead a little bit. Thank you for those amazing stories, Jim.
So you helped revitalize the Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas, and I'm interested in hearing about living and working there. You were there for 20 some years.
That's a long time.
Oh my God, yes. I still have a house in the Bahamas. It's rented out now, but where I lived for almost 25 years. But yeah, Compass Point had been started by Chris Blackwell, who of course was the founder of Island Records, producer of Bob Marley,
U2,
signed to his label. Joe Cocker, Steve Winwood, U2. I mean, the list just goes. It's insane, the incredible musicality of artists that he signed. But I had worked with Chris on one album, a little known album. It's called Smith Perkins Smith, and they were out of Muscle Shoals, and was signed to Island Records, and they had brought it up to Arden in Memphis for me to mix. So I took it to be turned into said, would you mind just taking it to England? So, okay. So I went to Island Studios and offices on Basing Street in London, and this guy, I saw this guy coming down the stairs, and everybody said, "Oh, that's Chris Blackwell." So, oh, hi, Mr. Blackwell, good to meet you. And so we had knew of each other and had been not friends but acquaintances, because he released a lot of albums. So this one thing wasn't the big thing in his life, of course, at that time. But years later, now that was back in the late '60s, maybe early '70s. Yeah, early '70s. So years and years later, I thought I would get out of Memphis because the weather is so hot in the summer and so cold in the winter. And I thought, well, let's just do something different, So I was looking around. I had thought about moving to the Cayman Islands and had actually gone there and met with people. But the government there didn't understand what I was talking about, the things that needed to be done to make a real functioning studio there. So I thought, it's not going to work. And then just thought of Compass Point. I thought, there already is a studio in the islands, a well-known one, a really good one. And it's Chris Blackwell. So I called Chris up and we talked about it. And he said, yeah, it was doing great for a while, but then a guy named Alex Sadkin, a great producer and engineer himself, who had been running it, had been killed in a car crash down there. And Alex produced one of the Foreigner albums. He produced the Thompson Twins, several acts, really good guy. But he had died. And so Chris said, I don't have anybody to run it now. Would you want to go down there and we'll go in partners on it? And I said, well, let's see. So I flew my plane down to Nassau and went over and met the people at the studio who were local people. But there was nobody, it was in disrepair. It had just, since nobody big foreign had been coming in from the US or England or wherever for a couple of years since the guy had died, Alex had died, the locals had just kind of let it go because they don't, no offense at all, are great people in the Bahamas, but you've got to understand the international record business. You've got to understand what a studio needs to be to get a big act to come in. It's got to be just right. Right equipment, kept up, everything maintained, have all the instruments at hand. So I looked around. The studio was great, but one room had a flood. Something had happened on the roof and it had flooded down. It just left the room sitting there covered with magazines and old equipment and things. It was all mildewing, and another room was this and another room was that. Just a mess. So I got with Chris. We sat at the front desk at Compass Point and talked about it. And at one point, the keys were there. They're not Chris's keys because he just comes and goes as he needs, in and out of wherever. This was the keys of the studio manager at the time. And the keys were sitting there on the desk. And at one point, after we just talked a lot, he said, yeah, I think this will work. And he picked the keys up and he threw them across the room. And he said, if you catch them, and I instinctively just reached up and grabbed the keys, as you do, And he said, I guess we're partners. It's your studio. Oh, okay. So I moved down there, cleaned up the whole place like crazy, used some equipment that was there already, but brought in a lot of newer gear, brought all of my own equipment because I already had two studios. So I brought a lot of good gear down and really just made it a world-class place again. And it was already a well-known, worldwide known studio with AC/DC and the Rolling Stones and lots of people before I got there. But when we got it back going, it was just incredible, the artists that would come in. Lenny Kravitz, Bjork, Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, REM. I can't even begin to say artists. It's so amazing.
We saw the list. It's like a couple dozen or something. Almost. It's there's so many people right there. Al Green, Crash Test Dummies. You worked a lot with Lenny Kravitz.
Yes.
And you wrote it's a photo book, I believe. It's Living with Lenny. It's a book of photos.
Well, actually, we never released that book.
You didn't?
We were talking. No, I've got about almost 100 photographs of Lenny over the years, and some really, really good ones, if I do say so. but we decided not to make that. We were working on an actual book, Living Lenny, and he was writing the foreword for it, and the pictures would be there, and I would have stories about the studio. But we canceled that actually. So I don't know why that's still lined, but we didn't do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's probably my error. I thought that book was
no, that's okay.
A work in progress.
Yeah, but I've worked with Lenny. We're almost like cousins. We're really close friends, and we've worked together quite a bit. And I did the whole 5 album that had Fly Away on it with him at his place in New York, and finishing up at Compass Point. 14-month album there of recording.
Yeah,
you played the toy piano on one song. Right?
Is that true, Terry?
It is true. It is true. I got a little toy piano, one of those little red things with about 8 keys on it that the kids get, you know. Did on that one song.
Yeah,
that's great.
You've worked with obviously a ton of incredible people.
So many artists.
But is there anyone that you didn't get to work with that you would have loved to work with?
Yes. A couple of things. There are 2 things that make me so sad to this day. The first was Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
I got an offer to engineer the Jerry Lee Lewis album and record it in Memphis at Ardent at one point. And I was a huge fan. I loved and still love Jerry Lee to this day. It's one of my all-time heroes. But he had just had an incident where a gun had gone off in a studio where he was working. His bass player had been shot in the leg.
Wow.
And I was scared of that. And I just thought, oh, gosh, what if I got shot? So I turned that down, and I'm so mad at myself.
Was it his
this
gun?
day. I don't know for sure. I wasn't there. There were different stories. Some people say it was. Some people say it wasn't. But anyway, that had happened. But hey, Phil Spector, so what? It happens. Shouldn't say that. That's not fair to Phil, I guess. But anyway, so I turned down that. Didn't get to work with Jerry Lee Lewis. There are 3 more, in fact. Another was that the Beatles called up, Brian Epstein called up Stax Studios and said, if we can keep this completely quiet, I want to bring the Beatles to Stax and record at least a song. This was when they were doing either Rubber Soul or Revolver. I think Revolver. I'd have to look back to see which one. But Al Bell, who was president of Stax at that time, and I was working with him. He's the wrote I'll Take You There, produced the Staple Singers, worked with him very closely at Stax, came to me and said, look, you're our poppest guy here. So will you engineer the Beatles if they come to record at Stax? And I said, I don't want to. No, I didn't. I said, sure, I'd love to do that.
No, I didn't.
So what was that? So I said, yes, this is exciting. And I was so excited. Well, what happened was one of the partners at Stax, a woman who was one of the founders, got so excited by it and couldn't help herself. She leaked it to a local newspaper.
Wow.
A story came out. The Beatles may come to record at Stax. And as soon as that got in the press, Brian Epstein canceled this. I'm sorry, we can't come. It's not going to happen. So I missed out on that. And that song was to have been Got to Get You Into My Life, which if you listen now to it, you'll hear George Martin attempting a Memphis horn-like section on it, which is very good, but it's not what the Memphis horns, it doesn't sound like that.
The
it's
horns on that song, correct.
But I would have been working on that, so I missed out on that. Another one was I was working in England, lived there for quite a while, and worked out of Abbey Road for a year. But I had a whole schedule set up all the way through the year of maybe it was 86, 85, somewhere along in there. And I had kept putting a band off, a band called the Sluggers.
Okay.
There was a great band out of Nashville, and I kept putting them off and said, I can't do it this month. I'll do it next month. So finally I had told them, Sluggers, I promise you on my life, I absolutely will be doing your album around the Thanksgiving, November area of 86, I think it was. And they said, you promise? I said, I promise. Nothing will stop me. I will be there. I promise we'll do this. And wouldn't you know it, a couple of days later, I get a call from AC/DC's manager at the time, Steve Barnett, and he wanted me to go to Compass Point, which I had never been to yet at that time, and produce a couple of songs on AC/DC for the movie. It ended up AC/DC. It ended up being the Who Made Who Things.
Okay.
So I had to turn it down. I had promised all my life. I could not renege on a promise to friends. So I missed out on AC/DC. And the last one was I got an offer to produce Ozzy Osbourne, a solo album.
Wow.
And I met with him and Sharon at their house in London, and the kids too were out swinging on swings with the nanny. But Ozzy was great. I really liked him. Sharon was just total business, together woman. I thought this could work.
Yeah.
And then I went down to HMV Record Shop in London and looked at the previous Ozzy Osbourne albums, and I saw and I read all this stuff about bats being bitten and
bite the head off a bat.
I looked at it and said, "Oh, that's not my style. I don't think." So I turned down doing that album, and I could kill myself now for doing that. Ozzy Osbourne. I love Black Sabbath. I love Ozzy. I love all this stuff. The demos were great. I was an idiot, just an absolute idiot.
Was that one of the first solo out, like Blizzard of Oz, or?
I don't know which one it was, but it would have been around 80s, 85, 6, 7, along in there.
Yeah, so it would have worked. You would have worked well with him and the family.
Oh, it would have been great. It would have been great for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think Randy Rhoads was still around at that point. I think. Yeah. So God, it would have been great.
I think he was on the first two albums.
Yeah.
Randy Rhoads.
Yeah.
Terry, you have so many excellent stories. It's amazing. We've talked about music so far, but I want our listeners also to know, like when you said you flew down to the Bahamas, you flew yourself down. You're a pilot. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. I've owned 2 airplanes, and I had my just beloved Piper Cherokee Arrow that I used to fly all over everywhere. I would go see bands. I just fly myself.
Wow.
There,
so nothing surprising.
It's fun. It's fun, exciting, but I will say this, and it's part of what got me in trouble not accepting Ozzy and stuff, but I'm a very straight person. I don't drink. I don't do any drugs. I'm a vegan for many, many years, a vegetarian all the way back to the 60s. I work out. I mean, I just don't do a lot of things you associate with rock and roll people.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be a pilot, you need to be that kind of person.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Look at what happened with the Ozzy incident, for instance. I mean, it wasn't Ozzy's fault. You can't play around with airplanes. So that's why I say, I would go fly myself to see bands. But it was all very straight ahead by the book, filing a flight plan, doing everything just right.
Yeah. That helps us get to know you as a person. I'm thinking back, Jim, to the 80s when we used to read Rolling Stone and Spin, and then I grabbed a hold of New Musical Express. You were a journalist for them, and I think that was probably before the mid-80s. Yeah, you were doing, so this was reporting or photography or both? For NME?
Both, yeah. Yeah, I loved NME and would subscribe to it in Memphis in the 60s. And one time somebody was coming, I know it was Dusty Springfield coming to Memphis to record, which became the Dusty in Memphis album and Son of a Preacher Man, her biggest hit on it and everything. And I contacted NME and said, "Hey, Dusty's coming." And oh, great, because we can't afford to send a reporter over there for it.
Right.
So I went over to Dusty, interviewed her, took photographs of the session, wrote a story about it, and it was printed in ME. And after that, they would call me, "Oh, this so-and-so's happening. So-and-so's coming. English acts coming to the States. Would you go cover it?"
Yeah.
So, I would just do that.
You were the reporter here in stateside then. Yeah, that's what you were doing.
Yeah. In the mid to late 60s.
Yeah. Amazing. also Jim and I are just so impressed. I can't get over it. I dabbled in photography a little bit. And so you're a photographer. You've done it professionally of people who are musicians, famous musicians, but also other things. You've got a couple books out. People can check that out. I guess I can't pass up hearing about the MLK story. You're actually,
one of the last photos.
Yeah, I mean, we can't go on this afternoon without at least touching on that. But our listeners can check out your other photography when they go to your website. But what about MLK?
Yeah, I'll give. There's two websites. There's terrymanning.com.
Okay.
Which is obvious, but then there's one called themanninggallery.com.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And on that one, it's totally devoted to photographs. There's probably 150 or more photographs on there. A lot is art photography, what is called art photography. I don't call it that, but people do. But it's just things I like. It's things I see, things I want to isolate from the rest of the world and just put on display in a place where people can see it and go, oh, I would have walked right past that, but I see the beauty in that thing now that you've, I mean, they don't say that physically, but that's the concept to take a thing.
Photography as art, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I see that looks like a painting perhaps, or I have done portraiture and I have done album covers and things like that. But what my big love is just the art photograph, a single, here's one sitting right here. I'll just hold this up.
All right.
So you can't really even tell what it is, but it's just part of a small building with the sky behind it, where I just loved the coloration of it and the composition.
Right. For our listeners, it
separated it from where it is.
Right. So for our listeners, that was a stucco, almost like a Spanish architecture, stucco, and the bright blue is on the building as well as the blue sky up above. Yeah, right. And I was just struck by how the colors match on that, and just things like that. It could be anything. Yeah. And there were 25 people standing around this thing, and nobody was looking at it. Yeah. But if you put it in a wall, they might go, "Oh, what? I like that. Where is that? You were standing by it. You didn't see it. You know what I mean? It's scopophilia, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Taking something. And there is what I witnessed on your gallery on your page, I saw there is a lot of you like a lot of that bright, rich color in a lot of them. Yeah, I love deep in, especially where certain times of the year or certain times of the day where the sun's at a certain angle, and if you get the camera just right and the sun is the light is polarized, it can just enrich. I don't know. It's hard to talk about. It's like dancing about architecture, they used to say. But and those who are photographers to know about with a polarizer, you take away the glare and you have a real richness without that glare of the angle of the sunlight hitting your eye. And so, you bring out a richness with that. Yeah. So I've done this. I've done photography as long as I've done music, and as intensely, and it's as important as music. And I've worked in it professionally, so it's not just a hobby type thing. But back in the 60s, a very close friend of mine was William Eggleston, Bill Eggleston, we called him then. He became Sir William once he became the best known color photographer of the 20th century, I would say, and really invented modern color photography. But we were he was a little bit older than, of course, but still mentoring and just kids hanging out doing things. So I would always have a camera with me, or almost always, except in the studio, rarely, because I don't go to the studio to take photographs. You do go to do your job. But sometimes I have a few session pictures. But anyway, in the mid 60s, almost late 60s, 1968, Martin Luther King, Dr. would come by Stax Records. He was a friend of Stax Records. Al Bell, who was the eventual president of Stax and eventual owner of Stax, was a very close friend of Dr. King's. They worked together in the civil rights movement. But one day, Al Bell called me up real early in the morning, and he said, "Hey, you
mentioned to me a couple of days ago you just got your first new car, and I saw it. It's really nice. And I said, yeah. So we're taking that car out to the airport and help pick up Dr. King and his people and baggage and everything that's coming. They were coming in town for the sanitation workers of Memphis strike. The sanitation workers felt that they weren't being respected and paid correctly, and just, they were looked down on, almost all black. And It was pretty much a racial thing. So Dr. King had taken up their cause, and that they called it was I Am a Man. So they had these I Am a Man marches, and the garbage workers were saying, I am a man too. Treat me like a man, not a garbage worker. Yeah. And it's a very right thing to have done. Right. So I said, yeah, Al, I can go help. So a couple of Stax people took their cars out, and they got a couple of taxis, and we got bags and everything. So I'm walking down the hallway wondering where they'll be, and I see a bunch of people coming. I said, oh, there's Dr. King there. Now, I had seen him in the halls of Stax, and he had seen me probably around Stax. We had spoken, but I wasn't a friend or anything like that. Yeah, right. I just was one of the Stax guys, the young white guy at Stax, one of them. So I'm walking down the hall, and they look up, and Jesse Jackson's there, and Ralph Abernathy's there. Ernest C. Withers is there. Several people in the retinue of people that would accompany Dr. King in the day. And this was the end of the days, unfortunately. So I walked up and I thought, hey, I've got my camera with me. So I just took some photographs. And I was as close to Dr. King's face. The ones you see on there are not cropped. It's not pulled forward in any way. No, it's a normal lens held, within 6 to 8 inches of his face, just holding it up and shooting photos.
Amazing. And
I took several pictures, and then I told, of course, that night, that was in the late morning of April the 3rd, 1968. And then I went to the studio, had a band to pick up at the airport a little bit later from Missouri, got them, went to the studio, did the session. And I thought, whether he's there's a rally tonight at a church, there's some speeches, I'll go down there. And this was at Temple in Memphis, late in the evening of April 3rd. And Dr. King wasn't scheduled to speak. Some of the other people were speaking. The church was full. This church had skylights all the way around in a square around the top of the ceiling. That night, it was a severe storm came through. It's lightning and thunder crashing like crazy. And everybody wanted Dr. King. They kept saying, we want Dr. King. Yeah. So they ran to the Lorraine Motel, because I had driven down there. I left that part out. He didn't get in my car at the airport, but I took some bags and a couple of people, and we drove to the Lorraine Motel, let everybody off. So somebody ran from the Mason Temple a few blocks down to the Lorraine. Dr. King, he came back. His speech was not planned, no rehearsal, all ad-libbed, off the cuff that night. He came up, and I remember sitting down, just looking up at him. The lightning is crashing like crazy, the thunder making huge noises, and it's all coming through these skylights. It's lightning flashing, and he's giving this, I may get there with you. I've seen the top of them, and I may not get there with you, whatever.
Right. I've heard
almost foretelling what was about to happen. And I was just in chills like never before, with this whole scene of a church full of people, every word going, yeah, and the lightning showing through, and the thunder crashing, and the most powerful speaker perhaps ever, is certainly one of the best ever, speaking just feet away. And I was just, whoa, how do I get to see these things? And then the next morning, he assassinated, shot and killed. Wow. And I was back in the studio. I'd planned to go down to the Lorraine and hang out, but the session was going, and I couldn't leave. So we get a phone call, and everybody is just stunned. Wow. Everything stopped.
Yeah.
Dr. King has been shot and killed.
Yeah. This is getting really bad. You thought, this is.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And I told Al Bell, I've got these photos. And he said he contacted Time Magazine and they wanted the photos. And at the last minute, I said, you know what? You can't have them. I don't want them printed in Time Magazine. I just couldn't do it. I don't know why, but I couldn't do it. I put them in a box for 35 plus years, nearly 40 years, and didn't even look at them, anything. There's just something about them. The whole thing was so deeply troubling and important to me, to my soul. I just couldn't do that. Finally, I got them out. I looked at them and I said, well, I guess I'm over some of that, and these could be seen. They should be seen, really. It's part of a small part of history. So, so I did pick 4 that were the best, I thought. And I display them now in my gallery shows or in museums and at the manninggallery.com website. Of course, they're there. There's a new page that my management has kind of made me make, which the whole page of Memphis from 67 to 69.
Yeah.
All black and white and all centered around the assassination before and after, things that it's just what life was like.
Yeah, the
what were white people doing? What were black people doing?
Right.
Yeah, just what did a restaurant look like? But still they were, to me, artistically taken photographs, not intending for them to be shown 40 plus years later this way. It was just what I saw that day.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very bizarre how it's all happened.
Thank you for sharing that night. So then when we see the photos of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we'll be able to see and think about the night you described with the lightning and the thunder and such. Yeah. Amazing. Terry, you've given us so much of your time, and we still did not talk. You have several albums. You're also a musician in your own right, and you have several albums out. We don't have the time to go through all that. People can check that out on Apple Music, as Jim and I stream Apple Music, search, and can find nearly everything. You never can say everything.
And I'll say one thing, just don't go Spotify.
What's that?
What?
Don't go to Spotify. Use Apple Music.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
I prefer Apple Music.
Yeah. So there would be another hour of photography that we could talk about. There would be another hour of just your own music that we could talk about. Jim and I did some research, did some listening, and what's just to say, what's your latest project musically?
Well,
if you would talk about it.
Yeah, no, I usually can't. I can't talk names in advance of band. But I have a great band out of Wisconsin that will be coming to El Paso. It's a great studio here called Sonic Ranch. I like to go track a really big room that they've got, and then I'll bring it back here for mixing and where you see here. But a great band that we'll be doing in April. I've also got another album of my own recorded that I want to put out, but I'm just waiting. I don't feel like it's quite the right time yet, but I have two albums. In fact, one is an instrumental album that's just a tribute to tequila, a tribute to green onions, a tribute to whatever, not exactly copying, but making tribute to styles that when instrumentals were something. I love instrumentals. And they're not like that anymore. Right. So I've got that, and I've got another vocal album which has some sort of R&B-ish type things and some rock things that I'll probably this year I'll go ahead and get that released.
Have you heard, speaking of instrumental albums, Peter Frampton's album that came out last year? It's called...
No, I haven't.
I got the album last year. I got the signed edition vinyl, and I just got a chance the other night to listen to it.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's called I Forgot
excellent. It's all instrumentals.
Words.
I forgot the words.
Yeah.
It's a great
title.
Oh, excellent.
And there's a Lenny Kravitz song on there. Are You Gonna Go My Way?
Done
okay.
instrumentally by Peter Frampton.
Yeah.
Cool.
And he's got a great bunch
I will absolutely.
Yeah.
I will check this out. I love Peter. He's a great guy too. Very nice guy.
Yeah, I've seen him a couple times.
Yeah.
I've never met him, but so I assume do you still play live music? I know with COVID it's a little
Yeah,
difficult these
I
days,
was
but-
playing live up until COVID came,
Okay.
and I haven't played. So for 2 years, I have not played live.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
I'm about ready now.
Mhm.
I love to play live. There's
Yeah.
something special, as I'm sure you guys know,
Yeah.
when you get on stage. Even if you make a mistake, it's all good. It's just fun.
Yeah. So listeners can find you through your website, of course.
Yep, you've
both
mentioned
of
two
your
of them.
websites.
Yeah. And thank you so
Yeah.
much for the time that you've given us and the stories. My mouth dropped a couple times. Mouth dropping, jaw dropping stories.
I got chills with the mention of Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, like are you? Yeah, I looked at Jim like, is he making that up? That's Stephanie.
I know. It's crazy. The main theme of everything is that I've been extremely lucky. Right place, right time.
Mhm.
Right.
Just can't believe it, really.
Yeah.
And one more thing, Terry, just personally from me, it's you're straightforward, you're a go-getter, you're persistent. You said leading the straightforward life, that you mentioned, just and going and getting it. It's very inspirational. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you guys. You have a great show and all fun.
It's been a pleasure and an
Anytime.
honor. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
My pleasure,
Terry.
guys. Say
Have a
hello to
great
New
day.
Jersey.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
He shot out of El Paso, he was on the run, taking over the world at the point of a gun. He fought the law, but nobody won. And then somewhere along the way, as the sky went from blue to gray, he thought one more time of that place he'd left behind, the West Texas skyline.
Today's interview was recorded on Zoom and at Did You Say
7
Studios in Washington, New Jersey. Go to the YouTube channel for exclusive video content. Exit music by the band 99%. Today's show was produced and edited by Jim Thatcher. You can find Jim and Mike Talk Music on Apple Music, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The songs What the Use, I Ain't Got You, Let Her Dance, and West Texas Skyline, used with permission from Terry Manning.